Chair, item 1 on the agenda is the appointment of chair for the committee. So can we have nominations, please?
I nominate Clive, Councillor Jones.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Are there any amendments? Can we take it to the vote then, please? If you can put your hand up if you're voting for. Yes, that's carried, Chair. So Councillor Clive Jones is reappointed as committee chair.
Thank you, Mayor.
Congratulations, Clive.
Thank you, and thank the committee very much. Go on to item 2, and that's the appointment of vice chair. Can I move Councillor Darren Roberts?
Second that.
Been seconded. Any other nominations? If not, could you all vote in favour? That's okay. I think that's unanimous.
That's Chair. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues.
And if we can put all our hands down, that's it. Lovely. Item 3, apologies for absence. I understand we've got apologies from Councillor Jeremy Davis.
All of the members are here, Chair.
Yeah, and we've got Councillor Tydfil's got technical problems as well. Okay, item 4, declarations of interest. If you look at your agenda, any declaration of interest taking into account the notes A and B. Any declaration of interest? No, I've not, no indication. We then go on to item 5 on the agenda, and that's Audit Wales Annual Audit Summary for 2020, Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council, and that's to receive a report of Audit Wales. And Helen and Ian, are you going to do a double up on this one?
I'll take this one, Chair,
Okay.
and then Ian can help me out if there's any questions.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
So today we present our annual audit summary. So to summarise the work that we undertook last year against the Auditor General's duties, and they being the audit of accounts, value for money studies, continuous improvement, and also looking at the Council's application of the Sustainable Development Principle. So the summary provides further links to other areas and reports, such as an infographic of the Council's finances for 2019-20, a report on the delivery of the Flying Start programme, last year's financial sustainability report, the National Fraud Initiative, a link to that, and also some links to the other national reports we've issued as the audit body. So just to say, the issue of this annual audit summary was delayed slightly this year because we wanted to ensure that the Council considered our report on the assessment of progress to address key concerns first, which was considered by the Council on the 21st of April and the 19th of May. So I'm not going to go through the report in any detail because it is literally a summary of last year's work, but happy to take any questions, and me and Ian will answer them as they arise on the relevant areas, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Questions, Councillor Chaplin?
Thank you, Chair. I brought this up before. In terms of continuous improvement, the Cabinet Work Programme, they're supposed to produce a work programme. They did send something out last month, and the work programme covered just a month forward, which was June. But I looked at the Constitution, and basically it says the forward work programme will be prepared by a proper officer to cover a period of 12 months, and it will be updated quarterly. So my concern is it's 4 years now, and why haven't we seen an up-to-date work programme in line with the Constitution? Surely, if they want to drive continuous improvement, it's got to be driven from the top, and this has been outstanding for a while. I just don't. That's the driver. That's the start of everything. I brought it up a few times, and it's still not being addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone there who can give us an up-to-date answer on that question?
Yes, if I could answer that, Clive, in that, as far as I'm aware, is that there is a forward plan.
Sorry, that's it.
I think. Yes, as far as I'm aware, that we do have a cabinet forward plan. That is done in just advance every quarter. So I know I've fed into the cabinet forward plan for the first quarter, and I've also fed in now for the second quarter. So I'm unsure as to when that will be reported or when that will be made available.
Yeah, we had a forward work plan, but it only went forward a month. The whole point is, it says in the Constitution on 4.0213 that basically the work programme should cover a 12-month period and be updated quarterly. What we had only went forward a month. It's 4 years. We've had the first one, and it really doesn't meet the Constitution. Quite frankly, after 4 years, I would expect to have something a bit better than that.
Okay, I think that's something I'll have to raise with the cabinet, but as far as I'm concerned, it does go, as I say, we do have an advance of a quarter. So I've certainly seen and fed into a forward plan, which goes up until the end of September.
Okay.
So Chair, I'm wondering, I do apologise to cut across, Steve, if Councillor David Chaplin has seen the emails that came out this morning that when a forward work programme doesn't go 12 months like he wants, but does go to September 21?
That's the point.
That's not in line with the Constitution.
40213
of the Constitution says it should go forward to 12 months. So if you're wanting to change the Constitution, that's got to be a motion to do that.
I'm not on the cabinet, so David, I was just making you aware that it sent the one that goes as far as forward as September 21.
Yeah, I think we've had an answer from Steve Jones, but he's going to make further inquiries about that. And Steve, when you get the answer, could you, either yourself or another or a cabinet member, could that answer be relayed to all the audit members, please?
It certainly can, Clive, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Next is Councillor Julian Aberts, and after that is Councillor Darren Roberts.
The point I was going to make, actually, Chair, was the one that
yeah, I don't think we quite heard the last bit, but we get your drift that it goes up until September this year.
When was that sent? Because I was up to date with my emails. I've not seen anything. So has that just been distributed to a handful of people?
It was sent to 3 different. Sorry, Chair, for coming in. 3 different scrutiny panels. Neighbourhood Services, Panya Skinner's one, which is governance, and Bill Smith's, which is social services.
So it wasn't sent to all councillors because I've not seen it. Yeah,
I don't.
I think it went to all the chairmen and vice chairs. I think.
Right. That accounts for a number of us on the committee who haven't seen it yet. Right. Councillor Roberts?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to mention that actually. I haven't seen it. I'm looking at my emails now while we're online. Can't see that there. So Councillor Salmon has obviously confirmed that it's gone to scrutiny and not necessarily audit. And I was just going to recommend that we, through you, Chair, write to Alex Stevens, who controls the Cabinet and the Leader's office, to ask for a forward work programme, because Alex is very efficient, and I'm sure if he's got one to hand, he will forward it on.
Yes, Councillor Roberts, I'm quite happy to do that. If all the committee are quite happy to write on their behalf to clarify that with Alex Stevens, the policy officer for the Cabinet. There's nobody shaking their heads otherwise, so if that's okay, I'll write to Alex Stevens and ask him for the forward work programme for the next 12 months. Any other questions? I've got one for either Helen or Ian. On page 7 of your report, first dot on there, it says it's for 2019-20. I read in the second sentence, the opinion included 2 emphasis of matter paragraphs to draw the reader's attention to specific accounts disclosures regarding material valuation uncertainties over the council's property assets. And I go on to say about and the property investment funds relating to the pension fund, but the pension fund is administered by the lead authority, and that's RCT. But could either yourselves or Steve or someone clarify what is meant there about material valuation uncertainties over the council's property assets?
If I can come in there, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, this was discussed at the audit committee last year. This was a standard paragraph that was included in all of the local government accounts last year, and it was due to the valuers because of the market conditions in COVID pandemic, not in a huge amount of information about how the pandemic.
So sorry, Helen, we're having difficulty. It's not coming out clearly. Could you perhaps could you repeat that? Say that again.
Yeah, sorry, I'll turn my video off just in case. So yeah, it was the RICS valuers included a standard paragraph within their valuations last year, which mentioned the uncertainty regarding valuations as at the 31st of March and how they might have been impacted by the pandemic. So that was a disclosure that was included within all accounts last year, just a drawing attention to the reader to that certain note within the account. To date, for this year, we understand that the valuers haven't placed a similar uncertainty this year. They know a bit more about market conditions and how the pandemic has affected property value. So we don't expect to have a similar paragraph or emphasis matter this year.
Oh, fine. Okay, thank you for that answer. And I have a further question on page 9. That's in relation to rough sleeping in Wales. It says everyone's problem, no one's responsibility, in brackets, July 2020. And you state there, we looked at how well public services responded to the issue of rough sleeping. Overall, we found that responding to COVID-19 is an opportunity for public bodies to start addressing long-standing weaknesses in partnership working, which has stopped them from tackling rough sleeping in the past. It's an interesting paragraph that's been put there. The only issue is, because the Welsh Government have changed the law in relation to rough sleeping, the whole emphasis on dealing with these unfortunate individuals is that each local authority has now have to attempt to find alternative accommodation. And up until the 31st of March this year, because of the pandemic, we've had to put lots of these people in all sorts of a temporary accommodation, including hotels. And when the hotels want that accommodation back for the usual purposes, the local authority will have to find accommodation. My question is, in relation to that, is where is the money and resources expecting to come from to deal with this very serious issue? And one of the figures that we've seen in this local authorities is approximately 1.2 million.
I'll come back on that, Chair.
Thank you.
I should first say that the report you're referencing is one of our local government studies, which are related to all councils across Wales, as opposed to one of our Merthyr-centric local pieces of work. And I wasn't part of that study team, but you're right. You're right to flag that risk. My current understanding is that Welsh Government are funding this to the end of September. Steve will probably know a bit more detail than me. And you're also right that it is a big risk for most councils, if not all councils, financially. I think Merthyr have set aside monies going forward potentially to cover the increased costs. But again, Steve will have more up-to-date detail than I have on that. So I don't think it's a direct answer to your question, but you're right. You're right that it's an area of increased risk for all councils going forward, and there is a question of the funding of that once the Welsh Government funding stops, which I think is due to stop at the end of September as it stands.
Yes, that was really the thrust of my question, because come the end of September, unless a decision is made at national level in the Welsh Government, we're all in limbo land about it. It's a very serious issue and quite a big risk. One other question, and that's on page 6, the top of the page. It refers to key facts there. Some interesting figures there about the projected increase in the population between 2020 and 2040 of 4.3%. But the other figure that really jumps up at me is that there's no change in the number of working age population, but there's going to be a 27.1% increase in the number of people aged 65 or over. Could I ask where that particular figure was extracted for, because it covers nearly a 20-year period, and if that figure is bang on and is absolutely accurate, that's going to put a tremendous pressure on all services, particularly social services.
I'm aware that the source for that information was Stats Wales, and yes, it is sort of huge increase in that figure, and does have significant long-term implications for the area, definitely. So it's a Stats Wales source, but I'm not sure beyond that exactly.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to the famous saying that there are statistics and statistics, how they've managed to work that out over such a long period of time. I can understand if they can project for the next 5 or 6 years, but 20 years is a long time in my book to project a figure of that magnitude.
I could certainly try and get a little bit more information for you and send you and the committee something through.
Yes, if you could, I think the committee will be very interested, and I'm sure in that particular figure, members of the Social Services Scrutiny Committee would be interested as well. Thank you. No other questions? If not, any comments from anyone? Yes, Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I've gone on record as giving my concerns about the the rough sleeping policy or the amendments to it, I should say. I fully agree with the fact that, you know, we need to be doing something, but if Welsh Government are going to be changing their policy on remunerating or actually paying local authorities for this change in policy, it's going to leave a big black hole in our finances. Obviously, we don't know. We're talking about a third wave. We're talking about the Delta variant and what could be happening there. Although restrictions are easing, we're still not out of the woods by any shape or form when it comes to COVID. So to be stopping funding for something like this, I think is going to cause us and other local authorities a lot of issues if it does stop. So I hope that you know, if the policy is extended further, that there is some sort of finance for that from Welsh Government, but we just have to watch this space, I think, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And just to add to that, I think a number of members are aware that this issue is being actively raised by the Welsh Local Government Association, because when we think that we've got an enormous problem here, just imagine what the size of the problem is in the Cardiff, Swanseas, Newports and Wrexhams of this world. So it's a huge problem in Wales, and you were quite right, Councillor Roberts, that if there is no further decision of extending the funding allocated for this from the 1st of October, every authority, in my opinion, in Wales is going to be plunged into real difficulties. So I think we need to be very careful and watch this space. And I brought this issue up, and so have other members, for some weeks now. Any other comments? If there are none, in this case we need just to accept the report, because there's no recommendation. It is a report from the Wales Audit Wales. So can I thank Helen and Ian for that, and we'll go on to the next item, item 6. And that's the audit inquiries to those charged with governance and management 2020-21, and this report of the interim chief executive, pages 13 to 26. And Steve, you're taking this one.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And as you basically said, Chair, is that the Audit Wales, they must audit the council's accounts for last year, and that has to be in compliance with the international standards of auditing. We received a letter as just a council from Audit Wales, and they wanted our views on just a number of governance issues which impact upon the actual audit of the accounts. So those issues are described in paragraph 3.3, and they are in just respect of fraud, and our responses are in Appendix 1. Then Appendix 2 shows the council's responses in respect of laws and regulations. And Appendix 3 then shows the council's response in just respect of related parties. So I don't intend, Chair, and to go through each of the appendices in turn, but I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Questions of members? No questions? I've got one, Steve. It's on page 19. And this second below part of the page, and it says, are you aware of any instance of actual, suspected or alleged fraud with the audited body since the 1st of April 2020? And in the response on the right-hand side there, it says, although there have been individual investigations undertaken by internal audit, the council is unaware of any material level of fraud being committed. I'm aware that we did have fraud staff who transferred over to the Department of Work and Pensions some years ago. So could I ask, the other aspects still left with the local authority, how do we go about and dealing with any instances of fraud?
Yes, at this point in time, Chair, I have had a discussion with Mark Thomas, and we are going to be looking at the capacity within the authority and to be able to or to have a more rigorous approach then at just identifying fraud across the organisation or potential fraud across the organisation. It's as you rightly say, we did transfer our current fraud section to the Department for Work and Pensions a number of years ago, and so at this stage it is identifying that we don't have a specific fraud section within the authority, so we are reliant, I suppose, then on officers. If I give an example of within the council tax section, if they're aware of anything or become suspicious of anything. But we do need to perhaps to increase that capacity, and that's something myself and Mark have a scheduled meeting for this week.
Thank you, Steve. Mark, do you wish to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to add really to what Steve has said, and yeah, we used to have obviously a fraud team, but the responsibilities for investigating benefit fraud was transferred back to DWP some years ago, and the team then transferred over to DWP at that time. In some authorities, some members of the relevant team stayed behind, so we're still able to pick up certain aspects of fraud, but that wasn't the case in Merthyr. So functions linked to fraud are generally dealt with by internal audit, so we coordinate the National Fraud Initiative response and so on, liaising with various departments. We investigate sort of internal matters of fraud. If there are things linked to benefits or universal credit, they are referred via the benefit staff and the council tax staff to DWP. But as Steve's suggesting, I think there is room for strengthening that resource. There's some other things that we have worked on and are finalising in terms of updating policies and procedures and so on. But I think we've recognised, compared to other authorities, there is no dedicated anti-counter fraud resource, and that's something that we need to discuss. And as Steve has said, we're meeting on that later on in the week as it happens, to discuss what that could look like and the best way of approaching that for Merthyr. There's various options that for potentially looking at that, but there is counter fraud activity taking place, but I think it could be strengthened compared to what we had in place before, and in comparison with what some authorities have got in place.
The outcome of after your discussions? Who's going to answer that one?
Oh, sorry, Clive, you dropped out then, sort of partway through, but that's okay. I think you said about coming back to the committee on giving an update on sort of discussions. Yeah. Sure. Well, I've certainly got no problem with that. I'm sure Steve can answer as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, that's fine, Clive.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions? If not, any comments from anybody? No, nobody's in. Oh, I didn't got it, sorry. Helen? I think she's got problems. No.
Can you hear me now, by any chance?
Yes, I can. Yes, sorry, I needed to welcome you to the meeting because I know you've had problems. Yes, we can see you.
I could hear all the meeting, but it was faulty. But I'm back on now. So
Okay, I don't think Helen did have a hand up, but that's gone down, and she just said, all right, she's just thanking the committee for timely preparation. Right. Okay, I think Helen's either had connection problems, but we can't pursue that point. So if there are no other comments, can I take you to the report? Or Ian's with us. I know Helen was trying to say something to us.
I think Helen was just it was just a thanks for the timely response from Steve, etc., for that, you know, in terms of the content provided in that, and that'll then be taken forward as part of the audit.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. If there's no other comment, I'll take you to the recommendations, which is on page 13 under 221. The Council responds to Audit Wales' request for information in respect of the management and governance set out in appendices 1 to 3 be noted. So we'll undertake the vote exactly as we do in Council, so that people are under no doubt. Helen said that she can hear us fine. So thank you, Helen. So all those who wish to abstain on this, please vote no. All those who wish to vote against, please vote no. All those who wish to vote for the recommendation as contained in the report. I think that's unanimous, Merthyr?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. If you could all put your hands down now, please. Right, take you to item 7, and that's the Audit Wales letter to the committee's chairs. Now, I asked for this to be placed on the agenda, number 1, because it was addressed to me, and every committee member should see this and have read it. And before I ask for any questions from any members of the committee, I want to get my particular question in right at the very start. If members look at this letter, and it's on the other side of it is actually page 28, if you've got any papers in front of you, and it's the top paragraph there. It says, given the role of the Governance and Audit Committee is to review and assess the risk management, internal control, performances management and corporate governance arrangements of the Council, we would expect that all Council's Governance and Audit Committees formally consider all reports of external review bodies, principally Audit Wales, Estyn, and the Care Inspectorate Wales. And it goes on to say, the paragraph below it, and it goes on to say last sentence, the focus here should be on holding executives' officers to account to ensure that reports and recommendations have been acted upon. Some of our reports may be relevant for consideration by the scrutiny committee also. My question really is to the external auditors is, and this was signed by Hugh Rees, audit director. I take it from that the suggestion is that every report that comes out from either Audit Wales, ESDIN, or the Care Inspectorate Wales should be placed on each and every governance and audit committee of the 22 authorities in Wales. That's together with new additional duties that we will have to undertake, i.e. in dealing with complaints. So for me, the suggestion there is that there should be a doubling up of all these reports. For example, in Merthyr, we've got 5 scrutiny committees and we've got an audit committee. And I would suggest that reports, for example, in relation to ESDIN and Care Inspectorate Wales, time would be better spent dealing with those at the appropriate scrutiny committee. But it gives the impression, those 2 paragraphs, that it is expected for every report, because the words operative is to consider all reports of external review bodies. So you're still with us, Ian? I think
yeah.
Helen is perhaps can hear us as well. So could one of you perhaps answer that, please?
Well, I think just first I'll just give you a bit of background of how this came about, because this letter's gone out to all councils, because we just saw some inconsistency approaches across Wales, particularly in keeping recommendations and proposals for improvement in view. So I think there is discretion for the audit committee. You know, if you're right, a lot of reports will naturally go to a particular scrutiny committee. So I think, provided the respective parties are content with that, then I don't think we'd be encouraging duplication of scrutiny of a report. If education committee picks something up, then that's fine. It's more a case of ensuring that they are considered by the appropriate forum, and then that from time to time, depending on what the committee wants to assure itself, that the committee is cited of progress, so that essentially so that the proposals for improvement or recommendations by whoever, ourselves, ESDIN or CIW, don't drop out of view, and that you can keep cited of progress against that. And I think that's where particularly the arrangements have been a bit variable. So, for example, there might be arrangements that CMT are cited to that, but the committees themselves are not seeing that progress. So I think it's a matter for yourselves to discuss what you would like to see to assure yourselves that recommendations are progressing as you feel they ought to. So that I wouldn't be looking to sort of say you need to sort of equally scrutinise something that is being dealt with by a scrutiny committee, but you should be cited of who's dealing with it and that it's being taken forward. Right.
I'm pleased to hear that answer, Ian. It does clarify matters, and thank you for it. Bob, you've got a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I read it a little differently to what you and Ian have just sort of given an opinion on. I don't think it is a request. I think it's perhaps in keeping with what they see as the extended role of the Audit Committee under the heading of governance. Because if you read into the other guidance on it, it widens the scope. As I see it, further down in paragraph 3, it talks about saying we intend to issue this timetable to councils and CC to the governance and audit committee chairs every quarter. I see it as an extended role, not necessarily to put it on the audit committee's agenda for discussion every time, but certainly to keep them in the loop of what is happening in terms of governance. And speaking very personally as a lay member, I'll find it extremely useful to know what reports are coming through, because I don't get to see them until 4 or 5 days before they appear on the audit committee agenda, or indeed I'm looking through other aspects and I find the report I've never heard of. So in thinking forward to the expansion of the duties of the audit committee, I think it's important that all members do see these reports and at least have them in the background as knowledge of what is coming under the heading of governance.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for that contribution. But I think it was a part of the question, but a comment as well, and clarifying matters. Ian, do you wish to add anything to what Bob Williams has said?
Well, I wouldn't disagree with the sort of audit committee's role to have oversight of governance and be cited. I think if there's room to audit committee to be better cited of reports, then yes, I would certainly agree with that. I was mainly talking about the actual formal consideration of a report. There might be a report that goes on an audit committee agenda that notes this has been formally scrutinised by, for example, the Education Scrutiny Committee. But there would still be an opportunity, I envisage, for audit committee members to still raise questions about certain reports, even if it's not one that they're technically formally scrutinising. But certainly that oversight of what's the full programme of work from the external review bodies, yes, audit committee should be cited of that and comfortable that they are able to track and see progress.
And as Bob has just rightly pointed out, from what was said now, we'll have a timetable in front of us, so we should have sight of the proposed reports and when they're going to probably be produced. So we'll have that in advance.
Well, yeah, we're currently behind the scenes. We're working on producing that timetable, which should set out, estimates of dates and when we're carrying out work, etc. So we will share that with the council in due course. Not necessarily, as the letter says, not necessarily to formally present that as an item, but certainly share it with you and the colleagues on the committee for info. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, which we'll all be copied into, which I don't think has been happening necessarily in the past.
No, and we haven't necessarily formally produced such a timetable, but the intention is to do that going forward, and to make sure everyone in the committee is cited to that as we go along.
Okay, thank you. You okay with that answer, Bob?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the important one is, as you just said, it's the timetable that we should be aware of, because if that is put together properly, we will have advance notice, maybe a month or 2 months beforehand, to look at that report. So that's fine.
Thank you very much for that. Thanks. Any other questions? Could you put your hand back down, Bob, please? Thanks. And any other questions? If not, any comments on the letter? I don't think we necessarily need to reply to that letter. It's I brought it to your attention. I perhaps could write back to Ian Rees and tell him that his letters, I brought it to the attention of the Governance and Audit Committee, and we have discussed it this afternoon. So
I'd be happy for you to do that to the committee chair.
Okay, everybody okay with that? That reply in those that vein?
Yes.
Yes, people nod their heads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Item 8, and that's the Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021 and the proposed updated committee terms of reference, and that's to receive the report of the head of regional internal audit, pages 29 to 36. And Mark, you're going to take us through this, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, it partly follows on from the previous item, I suppose, in some ways. Yeah, the purpose of the report they see in paragraph 1.1 is to provide committee with an update of the current position with regards to the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, and as it relates to the Governance and Audit Committee and the proposed updated committee terms of reference. So that's the purpose of the report. You'll see there in the introduction in paragraphs 3.1, 3.2, the Local Government and Elections Wales Bill was passed by the Senedd on the 18th of November 2020 and received royal assent on the 20th of January of this year. And the bill was only one of 2 bills in the Welsh Government's legislative programme to continue during COVID. The bill was prioritised given the timescale required to introduce planned electoral reforms in time for the 2022 local elections. Paragraph 3.5, then the Act it states the Act is substantial and covers a range of topics from governance, performance, electoral reform, public participation through to regional working. And in summary, the Act introduces reform of the performance and governance regime, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail in a second, reform in electoral arrangements for local government, introduction of general power of competence, reform in public participation, local government and collaborative working. And I understand that elected members, scrutiny members, have attended workshops regarding the Act earlier on this year, particularly in March 2021, where an overview of the Act was provided. Section 4 then just sets out that the coming into force provisions of the Act are complex, with some provisions having come into force within days of royal assent, others within 2 months, and the majority via ministerial statutory instruments. So different things across the wider Act are coming in at different points in time. But I won't go into all of those details. I'll just then focus on the parts that are relevant to the Governance and Audit Committee. So moving on to section 4.3, paragraph 4.3 of the report. The Act introduces previously consulted upon reforms to audit committees, and then it says section 115 of the Act came into force in April 2021, so obviously April just gone. This covers matters related to the committee title. So the title of the committee is obviously changed now to become the Governance and Audit Committee, as you'll be aware, and it also covers further wide responsibilities in relation to performance assessment and complaints, as set out in the bullet points below that. So there's a requirement to review the Council's draft annual performance self-assessment report, and also for the Council to receive the finalised annual self-assessment report in respect of a financial year as soon as reasonably practical. This is the wording coming out of the Act, so it is quite technical. The next bullet point relates to having to once during the period between 2 ordinary elections to consider the independent panel performance assessment report into which the council is meeting its performance requirements. That's something that happens, as it says, once in an electoral cycle. So there'll be a peer review exercise, and the committee then will feed into that report to have an opportunity to do that. And the other the final 2 bullet points at the end relates to complaints, and that's where the committee will have responsibility to review and assess the council's ability to deal with complaints effectively. So it's not actually dealing with, obviously, individual complaints. It's more about the arrangements and the ability to deal with those complaints and to make reports and recommendations around those matters. So that's what's come into effect from April 2021. So as you know, the name has changed, and later on at the end of the agenda, we've got a forward work programme which sets out some of the anticipated dates of some of these reports will be expected to come to the committee, but they will be flexible, but it sets out what's anticipated. Section 4.4, paragraph 4.4 of the report, which I know we've discussed previously, relates to other sections of the Act, and that's around membership. So, but this isn't coming into effect until May 2022, so it'll be after the next local government elections. And the change there is that 1/3 of the committee's membership must be made up from lay persons appointed to the council, because currently it's one lay member. For Merthyr Tydfil, there's the power to increase it, but it's not a requirement. This will be a change of the legislation, so it'll be a requirement to have 1/3 of the membership of this committee to be lay members, but also the fact that there'll be a requirement that the chair of the committee must also be a lay member. The vice chair does not have to be a lay member. It can be a lay member, but it can also be an elected member. And I just want to point out the deliberate mistake I made when I was pulling this report together. It says Vale of Glamorgan. That should clearly say Merthyr Tydfil, not the Vale of Glamorgan. So without wishing to confuse matters even further. But as I said, but that's not coming into effect until May 2022. So as a consequence of that, what we've done, there's some work was going on anyway in terms of updating the Constitution. So what we've done is added the changes as a result of the legislation that's come into effect now. So we've reflected that in the updated part of the Constitution, which is attached to this report as Appendix 1. There's also some changes to guidance introduced by SIPFA over the last couple of years that we've also taken the opportunity to reflect in the updated terms of reference. So subject to comments and any issues raised by the committee, was proposed then that legal department will take the updated terms of reference in the Constitution to a full council meeting to get that formally approved. One of the things I wanted to mention that has been pointed out, if I scroll down to Appendix 1 and down to page 34, it does refer to membership of 10 members, but in reality at the moment there's 8 members on the audit committee plus the lay member. So we just need to clarify what that position is, because obviously we need to make sure that's right in the Constitution, and going forward in terms of recruiting lay members, because it'll be 1/3 of the membership. We obviously need to know the right number from the start, so that'll be something that we'll need to make sure that's clear as well. But hopefully that's clear. It's a little bit complicated, and because different things are coming in at different times, but obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. And Councillor Andrew Barry has just joined us. Welcome. Questions? Councillor David Chaplin is the first up. A question.
Thank you, Chair. Reading the report, in 2022, obviously 1/3 of the committee is going to be made up of lay people. So the lay people are going to be paid, obviously. Yes?
That's my understanding, Councillor. That'll be based on the remuneration panel rates across Wales. That's my understanding. That's right.
So there will be financial implications with the committee. There will be an on cost, because the report says there are no financial implications.
Fair point. Yeah, good point there. Yeah.
And obviously, if we want this to start into 2022, we'd have to start the recruitment process before that, or possibly have people on before that to get them trained up. So has that been considered when we're going to start looking to recruit these people? Because we can't wait and hope it's going to happen. That needs to happen before 2022's deadline.
Yes, no, that's quite right. There have discussions been taking place on a national level, because obviously every council will be looking to appoint lay members. So there's been discussions with the WLGA about potentially them supporting the exercise. So at the moment, what the current plan is, subject to agreement by the relevant authorities, is that the WLGA will produce, or they already have produced, job descriptions, if you like, for both the lay member role and for the lay chair. They are looking to produce a draft advert, which would be a national advert, to obviously reduce cost and avoid duplication, setting out what the roles would be and saying, inviting applications, and there would be a common application form. And the current thinking is that then whoever those applications come from, they will be asked to express which authorities are they interested in sitting on the relevant audit governance and audit committee for, and that information then would be shared or passed on to the relevant council to go through its own local recruitment process. So at least the first part of it would be done on a national basis, but the actual recruitment then part, the decision making and so on, would be done at a local level. So that's the way it's currently being considered. There's still, a bit of work to do on that, and isn't so not every authority may want to take part, but certainly initially the 4 authorities that we cover have expressed an interest in being involved, and it's anticipated that process would start in September, so there'd be sufficient time to recruit and get members sort of up to the lay members up to speed in time for after May, by May 2022. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Much appreciated, and thank you, Chair. Thank you. Finished.
And to clarify, Mark, so you referred, Mark, to the composition of the new Governance and Audit Committee from May next year. Currently, we've got 8 members, but it's got 10 in there, but it's 8 members and 1 lay member. So in that report, which will come to council at some time in the not too distant future, it will have to stipulate there what the recommendations are for the actual membership. And just to confirm, if, for example, it says in the report that it's 10 members, 1/3 of those will have to be lay members, that is 2 in additional to the lay chair. Is that correct?
Right. My understanding is that it would be 1/3 of the membership. So if it's 10 members, then 1/3 of 10 is 3.33. So 1/3 of the 10 would need to be lay members, of which one of those would be the chair. That's my understanding. So in terms of what's likely to happen, Simon Jones is leading on updating the Constitution with Caris Kennedy as the monitoring officer. So this is just one small part of that. So I'm not sure of the timetable for taking the whole Constitution to Council, but certainly the part relating to the Governance and Audit Committee, I think, needs to come fairly soon. We just need to clarify, really, or the authority needs to be satisfied in terms of the number of members that it wants to have in place for the rest of this municipal year. And then what I anticipate happening then, we'll have to tweak the Constitution again to reflect the membership then to come into effect from May next year. So, but picking up Councillor Chaplin's point, we will need to know what the view is, to know how many lay members to recruit. So we need to know, is it going to be 8 members or 10 members or whatever number is proposed to be.
Yeah, and that was my very point. It's the recommended size of it then depends, because it's 1/3, how many lay members you're going to require.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got Bob Williams first, and then Julian Amos. Bob?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I can certainly endorse what was said about the timescale for recruiting the likes of myself, because it took over a year from me putting my name down to actually being interviewed for the position. It takes time. And given what Mark has said about the interim arrangements, it would be very timely, I think, to start almost immediately that recruitment process, so as you understand what numbers are going to be involved eventually. But my question was, first of all, to Mark. I can appreciate the change in the 2 stages of application of the law, and the change in the regulations, where we're going to a halfway house and then into the full-blown expansion of the committee. And looking at the duties and the tasks that are expected of the new constituted committee, they are considerable. In fact, I did raise an eyebrow when I read them and thought, well, this is going to take it much further and way beyond what current duties are. And it also, in my opinion, makes the committee more proactive rather than reactive to reports being presented to it. So, Mark, could you tell me, although we're going sort of at a halfway house before the full-blown version, would you expect, or is it expected, that the full duties are extended in the first phase rather than wait for the second phase, if you sort of follow my drift? And secondly, the committee itself, its constitution and its numbers, once I think they are, as you said, Clive, need to be decided quickly, because of the, in my opinion, the more proactive approach and the wider spread of duties, looking at things like governance, this covers everything, then I think the structure of the committee in fitting timescales may need to be looked at, not in terms of a broad number, but in terms of taking out particular duties and saying specific members of the committee could take on those tasks as subtasks to save everybody doing everything to meet the requirements of quite a broad brush expectation from the committee.
Okay. Chair, shall I
Yes,
respond, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob, for the question. In terms of the additional duties, as I mentioned, really in paragraph 4.3 then of the covering report, it sets out what they are. So those responsibilities came into effect from April 2021. So it's anticipated that we do address those points during this municipal year. The one there pointed out about receiving the report from the panel, etc. That'll happen post the next elections. But the bit around the performance self-assessment and the part around dealing with the arrangements for dealing with complaints and so on, we anticipate that been picked up by the committee this year, and later on in the forward work programme we have flagged up when we think those reports should come forward to the committee. So that's what we're anticipating, because the responsibility has come in from April 2021. It's just the part around the membership then really, which is the main change from May 2022. So the duties already have come in. It's the membership that comes in. The change in membership comes in from May 2022. In relation to the point you made around potential for individual members or maybe smaller groups of members picking up certain aspects, obviously there's a bit of a history of that happening with scrutiny committees and so on, and task and finish groups or panels being set up and so on. Now, I haven't heard that being mentioned in the context of the governance and audit committee, but that may be a way of dealing with it. I don't know if it's got any constitutional sort of implications. That's something I'd have to pick up with the monitoring officer and so on. But that's something that I'll flag up, but maybe worth considering. But as far as I'm aware at the moment, it's anticipated that reports will come forward in the traditional way to the committee, but covering a broader range of areas as we've already discussed.
Thank you, Mark. I think that answers your question, Bob.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chair. There's part of this I don't quite understand. Page 31, 4.4, second bullet point. It says the Governance and Audit Committee should be chaired by a lay member elected by the committee. Then on page 33, it says chairing the committee, the Governance and Audit Committee should be chaired by a person elected by its members. The chairperson may be a councillor or a lay member, but not be a member of the executive. So, am I reading this? It can be a councillor or it can't?
Yeah, it can still be a councillor for now up until May 2022, and then the requirement for a lay member to be the chair. That's the issue really. We've got this strange situation where you've got the duties coming in now or have come in, but the change in membership comes in May 2022. So this update to the constitution is like an interim sort of update pending the final changes then ready for May 2022. I know it's a bit confusing because of these things coming in at different times, but that's the answer.
Okay, Julian. Any other questions? Bob and Julian, could you put your hands down, please? Any other questions? If not, any comments? Yes, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Page 34, the frequency of meetings. It says the Governance and Audit Committee must meet at least once a year, must also meet if Council so decides. I know it goes on further on to say that they can meet their own requirements and meet as often as they want, but it just seems a little bit daft to me to put it in there that it must only meet once a year, because obviously we're not going to meet once a year, but if it was every quarter, then that's 4 meetings a year. But just it's a low starting point, then that's my only point. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Yeah, it's a hangover from the local government measure legislation, which is basically what started off the audit committees, and that's what the requirement was. The requirement was to have a minimum of 1 meeting a year, so that it just reflects that. But in reality, obviously, we've always had probably 10 meetings a year ever since we started the audit committee. But that it just repeats it's repeating what the legislation said at that time. So that may be something that we may need to drop. I'm not sure if it says anything about the actual frequency of meetings for the new legislation. I'll have to check that actually.
Yeah, it's quite clear it's going to need more than 1 committee a year, isn't it? You know, you look at the extent of the duties being placed on it now, and we're in a different ball game.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone? Any comments? Clearly, will require a further report on this, which I think Mark has already said would come to council at some time in the not too distant future. So we'll all see this again, only maybe there'll be some different sentences and words altered in the report. So any other comments, Councillor Barry?
Yeah, just on one on the Constitution, actually, Chair. I think what this shows is the importance of having a cross-party review of the Constitution, because there are so many questions that are popping up, and I think it would be useful to have somebody from Audit on that review so that we cover all bases when when it is actually reviewed, when we come to that section, whether it be just for that section or whether it be for the whole of the review of the Constitution. It just emphasises for me the importance of it being cross-party.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barry. Any other comments? No, if there's no other comments, can I take you to the recommendations of the 2.1 page 29, which reads the content of the report and the proposed updated committee terms of reference be considered and noted. Can someone move that recommendation, please?
Yeah, I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you. And is there a seconder?
I second that, Chair.
Right, it's been seconded by Councillor Thomas. Councillor Tubby, all right. Right, I'll take you to the vote, and as I said, explained at the start, we do exactly the same as in the council meeting. From any abstentions, please? Anyone voting against? All those voting in favour, please vote no. I think that's unanimous from what I can see, Maya?
Yes, carried, Chair.
That's been carried. Thank you very much. We're now on to, if you can all put your hands down, including my own. Right. Item 9, that's the annual internal audit strategy and plan for 2021-22. And again, it's a report from the head of the Regional Internal Audit Services, and it's pages 37 to 50. And Mark, you're going to take us through this one as well, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I start off on the first page, page 37 there, the purpose of the report is to provide members of the committee with the annual internal audit strategy and risk-based plan for 2021-22. The background there is covered in section 3. The United Kingdom Public Sector Internal Audit Standards provides the framework within which internal audit plan should be compiled. In line with the public sector internal audit standards, the head of internal audit must establish risk-based plans to determine the priorities of the internal audit activity consistent with the organisation's goals. To develop the plan, the head of audit consults with senior management and obtains an understanding of the organisation's strategies, objectives, associated risks and risk management processes. The head of audit must review and adjust the plan as necessary in response to changes in the organisation's business, risks, operations, programmes, systems and controls. So to inform the plan, I met earlier on in the year with different individual members of the corporate management team to get a sense of their perception of what potential issues they would be meriting internal audit looking at. So we took those discussions on board and any comments arising from those. In addition to that, in terms of documentation, we looked at the corporate risk register, corporate plan, key financial systems, what grant claims work might be required, and obviously the last bullet point there, the conversations with senior officers. So by taking those sources of information into account, this supports internal audit to achieve the following: 1, to comply with the public sector standards in compiling the plan, enable the governance and audit committee to monitor the adequacy of the risk management framework, associated control environment of the council, and based on the audit review set out in the draft audit plan, and also enables the head of audit to be able to form an opinion at the end of the year on the risk, governance and controls of the organisation. Due regard obviously to the changes to the way the council has been operating since COVID-19 has also been given, including any new risks arising as a result of remote working, and those have been reflected within the draft plan for 21-22. Section 4 of the report refers to the current situation of the proposal and refers to Appendix A then, which sets out in a more detail the process that we've gone through to produce the plan. But Section B, Appendix B then to the report sets out the actual list of areas that we intend looking at as an internal audit team for this year. And as just to reiterate, really, paragraph 4.3, the plan continues to recognise particular risks arising from COVID, availability of audit and service staff and challenges arising from remote ways of working. The plan is also flexible to allow for changing circumstances and events that may occur, and such as requests to respond to new issues as they emerge. And as has been the case really for the last year, internal audit work will be undertaken remotely using video conferencing and digital solutions as a basis for meetings and sharing documents and data. We have been into the office on some occasions if it wasn't possible to get evidence electronically, but 99% of our work has been done remotely over the last 12 months. And to be honest, that's the way we think it'll continue for the foreseeable future. I'll pause there and happy to take any questions that members may have.
Questions, members? I'll I did refer to it in our briefing this morning, just in case members want a clarification. If you look on item 33 and 34 on page 50, that's referring to certification of grant claim trailblazers and certification of grant claim sons. Perhaps you can tell the committee the answer you gave me this morning, Mark.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, they're basically two pots of European funded schemes that Regeneration applied for probably a couple of years ago now. So one of the requirements in relation to those particular grants is that internal audit review the controls and the expenditure incurred and so on. And basically that's without those two items of work are that we're required to review those the evidence there, and then submit the information on a European specialist system really that we have to complete to make sure that that we can demonstrate that everything is as it should be with the particular claims, so the money then is paid to the authority. So I can't remember the timescales for these now. I think they were basically 3-year projects, so I think they've got at least another year to go, maybe a little bit longer.
Okay, thanks. And just before I bring Bob in, number 18 on page 49, refer to temporary housing solution process, procedures, etc. to comply with statutory duty. I presume that particularly refers to the homelessness situation where we've temporarily rehoused several hundred of these people at the moment. Is that right?
That came out of, we did a questionnaire for directors and heads of service to complete, to sort of get a sense of how they felt things had worked over the last 12 months in terms of remote working, working from home, changes in processes. And that was one of the issues that was flagged up by one of the respondents around potential concerns linked to that aspect. So we haven't looked into that yet, but it could well be, linked to that. Obviously there's a wider issue about dealing with homelessness as we discussed earlier on, so to explore that a bit further, just to see what the issue was and if there's anything can be done in relation to that particular issue.
Because that one couldn't possibly, in my opinion, be dealt with entirely remotely, because it would require some of the staff to actually have to be compliant with all the restrictions we currently got at the moment, but actually physically, go to see people socially distant about their particular problem.
Yeah, it depends on how we scope the meeting, scope the audit, Chair, to be honest. So, yeah, we may maybe have to do part of it by coming into the office or dealing with sort of officers. We probably wouldn't be dealing with customers and so on, I wouldn't have thought, but that's a possibility. It's just trying to understand, what the current situation is, and is there anything that can be done from a controls or a point of view. You alluded to it earlier. If it's a funding related issue, well, really, there's not much we can do about that particularly. But just to understand what the current issues were. They may have been dealt with. They may have been things that were particular issues at the time, but have been resolved. So we'll explore that as part of it.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, on Appendix A, page 44, in the methodology, you state that the plan is driven by the Council's organisational objectives and priorities as set out in the corporate plan. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen the corporate plan, so maybe I'm way offside with it. But when you look at your Appendix B, the first 3 at least of the corporate service areas are more operational than they are strategic or corporate objectives or priorities. Anti-fraud and corruption, the government statement, the asset management allocations, and so on. So when you were taking into account the risks to set up the plan, did you take the corporate risks that were given within the corporate plan as priority, and how would they fit with the objectives and the priorities in organizational terms rather than operational terms? Do you follow my question, Mark? I'm sorry if it sounds a bit.
No. I think I follow, Bob. Yeah, basically the sort of term, sort of corporate objectives and priorities, is quite a generic term, really. But we tried to get that information from things like corporate plans. Obviously, you've got the RTI plan as well, about the recovery and transformational plan, and so on. There's the corporate risk register in terms of corporate risks and so on. So all those things play a part, but then obviously different people are looking at different things and is trying to get an understanding of where the potential pinch points are when things were certain things were reviewed in the past. So and when it says uses the term service area corporate, that's probably just describes where they actually sit in terms of the organizational structure. So things like annual governance statement we have to do anyway, but that's a corporate piece of work. The anti-fraud and corruption policies, that's a corporate piece of work. You'll see there item 4 is around reviewing once there's a report that is under information reports, a piece of work has been done on corporate risks and risk management arrangements this year. We'll be identifying some sample corporate risks we'll be looking at later on in the year in terms of looking at progress has been made and so on. So yeah, so I don't know if I'm really answering your question, Bob, but we take account of all those things and then try and see where we can add some value, and also obviously from a professional point of view is trying to get a sense of, if we haven't looked at certain things for a few years, do they need to be looked at now, sort of thing.
I think so. The sort of thing I had in mind was, looking forward, coming out of COVID is going to change the climate considerably, and there's going to be different demands on the authority to meet different objectives, which may not be operational, but they may be sort of aspirational to ensure that the organisation is sound and doesn't lose sight of what it has to change to meet them. And I think some of those issues were picked up in Welsh audit reports and other areas where they were talking about the corporate responsibilities going forward. They're aspirational rather than operational, if you see what I mean. And that's the sort of thing I had in mind. It's a huge amount of work. And for you and your department, it's going to be a nightmare to try and pick out which is priority.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, some of the corporate stuff, like I mentioned, the RTI plan and so on, there's a watching brief from Audit Wales on sort of looking at some of those things, because we try and make sure that we don't duplicate either with what's been done elsewhere. So we take account of, you know, what Audit Wales intend looking at as well. But we, you know, obviously there's limited resources. Undertaking audits uses officer time, so we're very conscious of that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, members? No? If not, any comments? No comments. Before I go to ask for a mover, Bob, can you put your hand down, please? Thanks. So we go to the recommendations, which are on page 37. 2.1. Members approve the annual internal audit strategy and plan for 2021-22. Can I ask for a mover recommendation, please?
I'll move it, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it, yes.
Seconded by Councillor Tydfil. Thank you. I'll take you through the vote. All those wish to abstain, please vote no. All those who wish to vote against, please vote no. All those who wish to vote in favour of the recommendation, please vote no. And again, I think that's unanimous, Mayor?
Yes, carried, Chair.
Thank you, that's carried. Right. We now go on to item 10. That's the Governance and Audit Committee Forward Work Plan Programme for 21-22, and it's received the report of the Head of Regional Internal Audit, pages 51 to 56, and I think Mark and Helen are going to take us through this. Mark? Yeah, you're on mute, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Elementary error, right. I was just starting to say that this is probably the first time for a number of years, really, that we've brought a forward work programme for the committee. There's something that's sort of fallen by the wayside over recent years, but been keen to resurrect it. So we've prepared the forward work programme, taking into account what historically is needed to go to the audit committee as was, but also taking into account what will need to go, recognising the wider responsibilities for the governance and audit committee. We've had input from Andrew Mogford in that regard in his role, and also from Steve as well, from Steve Jones from a finance point of view. So it's very much written having had input from those key officers. But basically, you know, speaks for itself, is to give members an idea of what's due to be coming to future committees and so on. It's not cast in stone. There needs to be an element of flexibility about the forward work work programme, but you'll see there in paragraph 4.2 of the covering report on page 52 what we still think may come to Audit Committee on the 19th of July, but I think Steve might want to come in around the accounts. There's still some not quite certainty over the date of when the draft statement of accounts will be ready. Steve, do you want to come in at that point, or do you want me to finish going through the report first?
I think, Mark, if you go through the report first,
okay,
and I'll come later on then.
Fine, okay. If I move on then to the appendix 1, which is the landscape document that basically sets out the various items that we anticipate needing to go to the committee over the next 10-11 months, covering governance is the broad heading, items from Audit Wales, items from internal audit and from accountancy, and it speaks for itself against the scheduled dates. There's a correct cross in the relevant box if it's applicable. So I wasn't going to go through it in a huge amount of detail, other than to say that we're anticipating that the performance report linked to was the second item actually, annual risk management. Sorry, wrong one. What is it? Annual performance report. Slightly further down is probably the 5th or 6th item on the list. It's anticipated that'll go to a September meeting, potentially September or maybe October. The same with the self-evaluation report, and the report linked to complaints is anticipated to go to the October meeting. That's what we educated sort of guess at the moment. But there's likely to be some changes around committee dates and so on, which I know Steve will potentially talk about when he contributes shortly. But hopefully, gives an idea of what's due to come and when, and obviously there'll be additional items that will need to be considered as they emerge during the course of the year.
Yeah, I've got 2 hands up. Bob, is that a question you got, or is that a legacy hand? Right, okay, thank you for that. And just before I bring Ian Phillips in, obviously you're going, and Steve will update us at the 19th of July meeting. Hopefully you have more information then and can bring us more up to date.
Yeah, if I could come in now, Chair.
Yeah.
I'll put my hand down first.
Yeah.
And it is in respect of the accounts. And the committee might know that Adele has had a nasty injury and broken her leg. And that happened at the end of March. So she's been out of action for some time and is now back with us in a phased return. So in respect of the draft statement of accounts there, we're still hoping to make it to the Audit Committee of the 19th of July, but we'll know for sure next Monday. So that might slip until into the 6th of September. With that in mind, then, the final statement of accounts, so regardless of when the draft accounts are reported, I did have a chat with Chair earlier on, and we're hoping to call a special audit committee on October the 4th for the actual final accounts. So those are the kinds of amendments that I would be looking for. So we'd certainly need these special on the 4th of October. And at the same time, then we'll have the final AGS and the Audit Wales Audit of Accounts will go to that same committee meeting. So those are some of the amendments that we just will have to consider. But I'll just know a little bit more next week whether or not we go with the draft accounts to the next audit committee or the one on the 6th of September.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Steve. And I know Ian Phillips, you had your hand up a while, and you put it down because of that answer.
Yeah, Steve's covered it. Thanks.
Yeah, so at least you're aware, and Helen's still with us. That
no, Helen's had to leave the meeting.
Yes,
I was just going to say she asked me to mention that, but Steve's covered it. Thanks.
Yeah, she did send a message. So at least you'll have that date in your diaries as well. Anybody got any questions of Mark or Steve on the forward work programme? It's obviously, as always, there's adjustments will have to be made during the year, but particularly we know at this stage what is likely to be the agenda for the meeting next month on the 19th of July, and we'll be updated further then, confirming these meetings. Okay. Anybody got any questions or clarification? No? Any comments? No. Thank you, Mark and Steve. I'll take you to the recommendations on page 51 under 2.1. That members approve the forward work programme for 21-22. Can I ask for a mover, please? Someone move?
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Tydfil, seconded?
I'll second, Chair.
Seconded by Councillor John Thomas. I'll take you through to the vote. Any abstentions? Anyone voting against? All those in favour of the recommendations, please vote now. Right, and that's unanimous as well, Merthyr?
Yes, carry, Chair.
Thank you very much. If you can all put your hands down, please. Clear to my own. Right. Item 11 as internal audit information reports. Hopefully, you've all been able to have a look at these reports. And if does anybody wish to query anything on those reports? As I said, hopefully you've had a chance to read them. I did ask Helen Harbord to actually, as well as the link, send the actual reports to you. I know it's short notice this morning, so you should have been able to have a little time in which to read them. If nobody wishes to bring up any points on that, nobody's. Oh yes, Bob.
Sorry, Chair, I hit the button wrong time. Sorry.
That's all right. All right. Okay. Well, if we haven't got any queries on that, they're there for people to read again if they so wish. We then go to item 12, and that's a reflection and evaluation of the meeting. I think we've dealt with all the items on the agenda. We've had a longer agenda than normal, and I think we've all between us asked the appropriate questions there. So anybody disagrees with that statement, just tell me now. Right, we're all okay and happy with that. Item 13 is any other business deemed urgent by the chair, and I think, Mark, you just want to bring us up to date with the staffing situation?
Yes, Chair, I think most members may be aware anyway, Gary Evans, who's been the audit manager for many years and supported the committee, left the employment of the authority and the regional service in the middle of May. So I just wanted to make members aware of that, really. So we've got a vacant post. We're making arrangements to agree a final structure for the regional service now. So hopefully that'll be finalised very, very shortly. So then we we can make progress in terms of filling the vacant posts that we've got for the service. So as soon as possible. But it's just to make you aware, really, that Gary's left. And obviously, I'm continuing to support the team in Merthyr, as I have done for the last probably 9 months or so, and will continue to do so until we've got more permanent arrangements in place. So just to make members aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And before I forget, I meant to say it, Steve Jones, can you pass on the wishes of the committee to Adele, and hope she's recovering well.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
I've got no other, nobody's indicated any other business they wish to bring up on today's agenda. So can I thank you all for your attendance, all members and officers, and I've no doubt I'll see you all soon. All the best.
Okay, thank you, Chair.